Hello. Welcome to Finsweet Live Build Day. It is Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern, every day. Every Friday, we are here with Alex Iglesias, Finsweet's CTO, to talk about something technical, to help us learn something new in this Webflow world. There's a lot of content out there about the native Webflow functionality. There's not as much about technical. And we know people are trying to get to that next technical level, and that's why we have this type of stream. So, Alex, today we're talking about the Webflow CMS API, right?
Yeah, very
Nice.
requested one. Yes.
Yes. Webflow has an API. It's specific for CMS. There's some really cool things you can do for it, and we're going to go over the basics of it. This is not an advanced walkthrough if you're trying to do something really, really technical and specific. This is kind of an intro to the API, how it works, how you can get started with it, and then we'll jump into a real life use case. So let's say hello
That's
to
correct.
everybody here. We have Rhino right here with you, Demetrius, who said, excited for today. We are Mika Dixon, Finsweet. Thank you very much. Belmont, looking forward to this. Sean Duval, super excited for this Friday build day. Sean, we appreciate you. Thank you. Babis, how's it going? Nice to see you. Okay, we have Christian, Dale Jensen. Hello. Nick the Martian. Nice. Okay, Spencer Nisley. I think I got that right. Spencer corrected me on the last stream. Spencer Nisley. Spencer, follow up on that. Let me know if I got it right from Minneapolis. Hello.
This is a challenge. Naming everyone correctly.
Of course, from all across the world. It's a huge challenge. Good morning, Keegan. What's up? Demetrius, hello. Penny, Sean Gibson. Okay, we got a lot of people in here. Spencer, I was close, but don't care. Nicely. Okay, close. Okay, and okay, I'll do this for you, David, oh no. Jershens. I'm not going to try. I'm sorry.
Oh my God, is
Michael
that
Riddle. Yeah, I don't think it is. And then Duncan Prince. Okay, that's it for the hellos. Thank you everybody for coming live. For everybody watching in the future, I'm really excited for this episode because there's API documentation about the CMS API, but there's not really much training about how to use it. So if you're technical, you look at these docs and you know a lot of what's going on. If you're not technical, you look at the docs and it's incredibly confusing because you don't know how this works. So today, Alex will be walking through how to use this. Oh, I don't want to forget this. I made a promise to Nelson, and that is to share the speed build challenge. So here I am sharing the speed build challenge link. Okay, looks like we cannot bring up link comments, no problem. But here in the chat, we have the Webflow Conf Speed Build Challenge. If you are thinking about doing this, even in the slightest bit, please go and participate in this. It is a great experience for people at all levels. So go check that out, sign up, and do something really fun and cool. Okay. I think we're ready to get started. Alex,
yeah,
let's now jump into this CMS API.
Nice. Okay. Can I share my screen? Because it's going to be simpler. Cool. Okay. So CMS API. Everyone knows Webflow has a CMS, right? This is one of the strongest claims from Webflow. You have that built-in CMS that helps you a lot when dealing with data. And many people know it, but many people does not know it. There's an API for interacting with that CMS. And specifically, if we read the description here, they're already saying this API is meant for programmatically adding, updating, and deleting items from the Webflow CMS. And it's programmatically specifically because that's what the API it's meant for. Be aware that this is not for your day-to-day tweaks that you would be doing right in the UI in Webflow when you're working just with the CMS. This API it's meant for bigger management tasks, things that you would like to do in bulk, or things that you would like to just consume in a different way when you're programmatically accessing that data, right? So okay, how about we try to first explore how is a Webflow project built. You know, what's the structure of a Webflow project? Because the CMS, it's not only for the collection, the regular collection list that you would use, you know, for building a block categories and the blog posts and the articles and things like that. Actually, Webflow, it's built entirely using that CMS, both for regular collections that you would use that way, but also for e-commerce, for users, the users are also collection lists. It's still the same CMS for the orders, for all the collections, the size, the items, everything is just included in this CMS structure. And we can play with it, we can access it and do some stuff, right? So what I was planning to do today was first, let's explore a little bit this documentation. And I think that it will be cool for people to try to see how to follow some documentation, right? Because most of what I'm going to tell you in this stream, it's just me that I've read the documentation previously. It's nothing special. I don't have any gift given from anyone. I just read the documentation. Um, but so we'll go through these documentation so people can understand how to consume it and how to start playing around with this API. And if we have enough time, what I was planning to do is to do a real live case, trying to not do the same exact thing, but inspired by what we created a few months ago. That's the Showcase 2K. And actually, I had it here already open. I don't know how many people knows about this project, but this project is one that we created to showcase the CMS attributes for filtering, sorting, paginating, all that stuff. And if you've checked this project contains the top 2,000 projects from Webflow that since the beginning, since the launch of Webflow. And to do that, guess what? We had to scrap the data from the Webflow showcase and store it in a collection list, right? So the use case that we had was, okay, I need all this data and somehow I need to dump it in the collection list of this project so we can work with it, right? So we'll try to do something like that. We'll try to not do exactly the same because that's a lot of work. We will need like 10 streams for that, but at least know the basics, how to pull a little bit of data, and how to put it inside a collection list of a project. Cool. Okay. Joe, anything to say before we start?
I don't. Let's continue.
Okay. Let's go. Cool. So, as I said, let's just walk through the documentation. We have this introduction. They're already explaining how is everything set up. We can see here, and I have some scrolling issues because of the Zoom. But we can see here already they show us that all the sites, they contain a bunch of collections, and each collection has a bunch of items, and each item has a bunch of fields. This is nothing new. If you work with the CMS in the UI, this structure is replicating the same thing that you see usually in a project when you're creating a CMS collection and when you're adding new items, when you're creating fields for the items, etc. It's the exact same thing, right? So now that we know the structure, we can start thinking, okay, how do we consume this? How do we start playing around with it? So the first thing that we want to check is obviously getting started. Here they explain everything. They explain a little bit about the HTTP methods that you can use, the parameters, authentication, things like that. What's most important for now? Let's focus on authentication, right? because obviously you have a Webflow project and only you want to use that Webflow project. It would be a pity if everyone could just, you know, delete items from Finsweet.com, or everyone could just add new items to the whatever project it is. This is something that it's meant to be private. Right? This is something that it's meant to only be consumed by people who is authorized, who has, who is, is supposed to be accessing that data. That's why this authentication exists. And that's why also you will hear a lot that this API, it's not meant to be consumed on the front end. This API, it's not something that you want to be calling directly from the browser. This is something that you want to interact with in the server. The reason is because it's a private API that needs to be authenticated, and only you want to authenticate for it. You don't want other people to be accessing that, and you don't want to be exposing the API keys. Having said that, there's actually two ways of authenticating and authorizing the access for the API. Well, the first one, and it's the easiest one, it's just by generating a token, and it's the one that we will do later when we start playing around with it. You can generate a token from the Webflow settings, but there's actually a second way of authorizing the API, and that way could potentially be consumed then in a safe way from the front end, but that's still not the base case. But it's by using the authorization code grant process. I'm not going to deep dive on it today, but if you ever used an application, for example, like Zapier, and you have that moment where they ask you to connect Webflow, right? You're setting a Zapier project or something like that, and then when you're trying to create the automation, you have that button asking you to connect Webflow, and then when you click that button, you go to the Webflow screen, and you can select exactly what projects do you want to give access to Zapier, and then you just giving access to Zapier. That's a whole different process that it's called. It's the Auth2 process, and that's meant for applications, and we're not going to deep dive into it, but just know that this exists and this can also be used. But in our case, what we're going to do today is just go to the easy route, and I'm going to go to the settings of this demo project. I've set up this demo project from scratch specifically because today here in the stream I'm going to show everyone the API key for the sake of demo. So it would be very funny if we start seeing random stuff happening in the CMS later, because everyone who has access to that API token can do whatever they want, right? So let's just do it. Let's just go to project settings, and let's say integrations. And here in integrations, what we will do is we will generate a new API token. This API token is the one that we will need for authenticating the access to the API. So let's do it. Let's just create this token. We got it here. If anybody's brave enough to type it themselves, go ahead and try to do it. But for now, let's just keep it here. Okay, let me here. And we know that once we start calling the API, this is the token that we will need for authenticating all the calls to the API, right? So let's leave it here for now. Let's move on. Rate limits, I think that we can jump on it later, but it's worth mentioning, as I said before, this API is not meant for day-to-day consumption, for building an application, things that you would want users to be directly calling your API for consuming the data, specifically because the rate limits are very low. Rate limit is just saying that there is a limit on the amount of times that you can call this API every minute. That's it. And in this case, there's just 60 requests per minute. This means that we don't have a lot of requests. That we don't have that much room to be calling the API a lot. But we'll get to that in a second. I think that we're just ready to make the first call so everyone knows what the hell is going on, because I'm talking a lot, but I'm not showing anything. And then after that, we can just try to plan how we're going to set up the project that's similar to this one. So let's go. Let's just say not OAuth. Let's just say that we want to access the data from the current site. I want to know exactly what collections are included in the site that I'm dealing with. Okay, this is something that we can do. And perhaps that would be a good idea if we just tell people things that you can do, right? Because I just forgot. But the first thing is just you can get metadata from your site. But if you check all this sidebar here with all the links that we have, we can pull data from the sites. We can pull data from the collections. We can pull data from the items. We can pull data from users, from products, from orders, from inventory, from the settings of an e-commerce site, and from webhooks, which I don't want to dive a lot deep on this for now. But yeah, so this is everything here. All of this, you can do it. You can access it. You can update it, and you can delete it using this API, right? Um, so we'll start with the most basic one. I just want to call the Webflow API to tell me all the information that I can have about the site that I'm consuming. In my case, the site, it's this CMS API demo that I've just created, but it could be any site. So if anybody wants to follow along, now is your time because I'm going to do it with using Staplets. If you want to follow along, it's just as simple as just going to staplets.com. And this is going to, I don't know if you need to create an account, probably yes, but it's free. And then inside stackblades.com, you can just create a new project, a new Node.js project, and this will help you to be able to call some server-side APIs from here directly using a Node environment. So I'll just spin up a new Node.js project, and let's try to call
Hold on
this.
1 second.
Go
You know
ahead.
what I'm going to ask
Yeah.
for?
Zoom in.
Zoom.
I know.
I can't
That's it.
see a thing.
Yeah.
So, and just to give
Yeah.
people maybe 30 seconds here, I've just pasted the stackblitz.com
Thank you.
URL in the chat. So if you want to follow along, you can follow along with this. If not, you can do it at a later time. But just quickly, Alex, can you give a quick description of what StackBlitz is doing and why we're doing it here instead of in like a VS Code or instead of right
Yeah.
in Webflow?
Stackblades is just a cloud-based code editor, right? That allows us to spin up an entire environment to work with something. Usually, if we were about to build an entire project, we would usually just go local, use our own environment with our own VS Code setup and creating a repository, things like that. But for the sake of, just demo, what I wanted to do is just spin up something quick that people can just jump on it and start coding without having to install anything. They just can just go inside and start typing directly. That's why Stackblades is very helpful. You just click on that, spins up a new environment, and we're ready to go. That being said, as I said before, if you're planning to build an extensive project, something like that, you probably want to set up your own environment. But yeah, just for the sake of demo, let's do it here in Stackblades. Okay, so one cool thing that you will find here in the documentation of Webflow, and this is very common in all API documentations, is that you will find examples on how to call the API. So for example, here, I want to get not here. I want to get the data from the current authorized user. That's it. And Webflow, it's giving me here on the right examples on how to call the API doing that. I have a shell example. I have a JavaScript example using their own SDK, I think. Not for this one. I think that it's not included in the SDK. But for other parts, they have a specific SDK for calling this. And you will see it in a second. So we will just use one of these examples, right? Let's just copy and paste and see what happens. So what I want to do is I'll just copy this example that I'm trying to get the current authorized user, and it will return me an ID, an email, a first name, and a last name. So hopefully this will return my data. And I don't know if we want to be showing my email to everyone. So perhaps we should try to do something different. Let me, because I hadn't thought of that. Let me try to instead list the sites which will just return the data from this site, because we just authorized this site, and it will return the ID from the site, when was it created, the name, the short name, when was it published, when was a preview URL, and a time zone. Okay, we want to get the data. So I'll just come here. We have a JavaScript example here, and it's weird because it's not using the SDK, but we'll check it later. Let's just copy this here. Let's just go to Stacklets, paste it in here. And obviously, we need to add the token, right? Remember that we need that token to be authorized for calling the API. And in that case, if we check the options for calling this, it's saying that there's a post method. I'm getting a site that not publish. I don't want to publish the site. Sorry, I want to list the site. This was the wrong snippet. So let's do it again. I'm calling this endpoint, and it's accepting the version 1.1 from the API, and it's asking me for an access token. So that's it. Let me zoom in. I'll just take the access token from here. This is the access token that I generated before. I'll copy it and I'll paste it here in the better authorization. Cool. So we have the code ready. That's it. Webflow provided the example, nothing else to do. Let's just run this. And to run a node script, what you have to do is go to the terminal. If you don't have the terminal open, never mind. I think that the terminal is always open here. But if you don't have it, I think that there's a way of opening and closing the terminal, but probably not. Let me know if everyone can see the terminal. Probably yes. Just go ahead and type node and then index.js like that. It's telling to node to run this index.js file, and then it will run all the script. Cool. So let's do it, and we'll probably get an error because we don't have this request package, so we need to install it. So let me zoom out 1 second, and we will say npm install request like that. This is because this is requiring a package that it's called request. And let's do it again. Okay, cool. So we have it here, and it's a little bit not readable friendly. So let me try to think how we can do this. I think there was a way of improving that. Let me just copy this for a second. And let's just create a new file. How can I create a new file? File here. And I'll say site.json. This is for the sake of showing you. Don't worry. I want to get this data like that. And I want to paste it here. Cool. This is the data that was returned from the API. This is returning an ID. This is returning when was this created. This is returning the name of the project, the short name of the project. This short name is the one that you see in the slug or in the webflow.io subdomain. You know, when you're publishing this short name here, it's this one. It's the one that appears here in the URL. In a preview URL and the time zone, we just see a bunch of data. So this was our first successful call to the Webflow CMS API. So let's just recap for a second what happened here. We just got the token. We know that the endpoint for getting the site data, it's this one, because Webflow is providing it from the CMS API reference. This is telling us that we need to get it from the site's endpoint, from the site's route. So we have here the site's route, and we're sending just the proper headers with the token included in there. And this just calls the method and console log the result. That's it. But I'm not liking this very much. And the reason is because we can do better. Webflow has actually an SDK that helps us with all of this and reduces a lot of the boilerplate. It just, a packaged, when we're talking about npm packages the other day, they just took all these use cases for dealing with the API, and they created a package with a bunch of methods that it's very helpful to use. So I'll just do that. Instead of using this approach, I'll install, and I don't know if there's a reference here. Is there a reference about the SDK? Let me just search it. Oops. Okay. This broke. Oh, it was just slow. Never mind. I'll search Webflow SDK on npm. If you go to npm, you will find a package that it's called Webflow API. And this package is the SDK that allows us to work with it. And instead, you can see how simpler it is, the code. So let's just try it. I'll just copy this example from here. I'll just go to Stackblades like that. And we will need to install this package, the Webflow API. So let's do it. npm install Webflow API. And we will need the API token. So again, I'll take this token. Give me a second. Token, 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 token. Here I have it. Like that. And you can see now that this is a little bit easier to understand with this package, because now we're saying, okay, Webflow, the package, just initialize and then just give me the site. That's it. I forgot about the site. So I just want to get all the sites like that. Can I do it? Try it. Node index.js. Right, it would be great if if we console log what happened here. So I'll just say then result console log the result like that. Let's do it again. And again, this is the same exact code that we did before, but this is a little bit simpler. This is just using the Webflow CMS, the SDK, sorry, for fetching the data in a more declarative way. It's simpler. Cool. Okay.
Now,
I
can
know that
I can
I've
I
been
ask a
talking a lot yet.
question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So you showed the JavaScript version before, and then you showed the SDK version. Can you give an
Mm-hmm.
explanation of what the difference is? Why do they have these two options? And just kind of explain more around that.
Yeah. So the first option was actually no option. Was just directly calling the API by using another package that was fetching the data. Um, and there's somebody here in the channel in the chat, Spencer, who's saying that perhaps Postman was a better idea to show how to interact with the CMS API. And I think that you're right. So the CMS API, you just call it. You have an endpoint. You have a URL. You call that URL with specific headers and for that request and a specific method. You pass the data and then you get some response from it. The only thing that the SDK is doing is just wrapping the boilerplate that you need to write to perform that API call and just doing it in a more simpler way that's more human readable. Let's call it like that. So we can explicitly ask for something. But if we take Postman, give me a second, it'll be 30 seconds. And we did the same thing. I'm loading it up. Just a second. Okay, cool. Can I? Let's just say, you know what? I think I have some private data here that I don't want to show now. So let's call using Postman on another time when I can prepare, because I was not planning to do that. But yeah, with Postman, you would be able to do this same exact thing. You would be able to just create a request, call the server, and that can get some data from the server using whatever you requested. So the summary here,
And
the conclusion is that, sorry.
no, sorry, keep going.
Yeah. So the conclusion is that there's just one only thing happening, and it's that we are requesting something to the Webflow API. There's an endpoint there, and we're sending a request, and we're getting a response. That's it. The way that you create this request and that you parse the response, it's up to you. You can do it manually, you can do it with Postman, you can do it with the Webflow SDK, etc. In our case, today we're using the Webflow SDK. I think that was the best summary I could give. And sorry, go ahead, Joe, because I cut you.
I was just going to say a worse version of that. So perfect.
Okay,
Let's
nice,
yeah, let's continue here.
nice.
And yeah, let's keep getting data and see how this works.
Yeah. Okay, so let's aim for the use case that I wanted to present, and it's that we want to create a replica, a very basic replica of what we did for the Showcase 2K project, and it's about just getting some data from the Webflow showcase and putting in a collection list, putting it in a collection list of our own project so we can deal with it, right? So our goal is in our project, the CMS API demo, is to create a collection list and then populate that collection list with the data that we're scrapping from the Webflow showcase. That's it. I'm not going to explain how to scrap, nothing like that. It's going to be simpler. You will see. So obviously, the first thing that we need is to create the collection list, right? We need some collection list to be able to populate it. And let's do it now. And I'll just do it very simple for now. I'll say, I'll zoom out one bit. I'll say that this is just a demo showcase. No, let's call it showcase demo CMN collection list. And in here for now, let's just have the name and the slug. That's it. How about we create an additional one? Let's say author, for example. That's it. Whoa, I need to zoom out now. Cool. So we have a collection list that it has three different fields: the name, the slug, and the author field. And what we want to do is populate this collection. We want to get some data and programmatically populate this. So let's start first by getting the information about this collection list. We want to know exactly what metadata it's holding this new collection list that I created. So what I can do is let's go to the CMS API reference, and in here we want to list the collections. Simple as that. We have a site and we want to list the collections from the site. And ideally, this will return this new collection that I just created. So we'll see the examples here. This is saying that I'm not going to follow this example because it's not using the SDK, but it would be the same. We would be calling this endpoint /sites/site ID /collections, and this would return the information of all the collections that I have on my site. The first thing that we need is obviously a site ID. It's asking me here, you need to pass a site ID. And if you recall, the first thing that we did was to call the API to get the information from our site. And in the information of our site, there is the ID. So this ID is the one that we will then use to request all the collections of this site. So I'll just do this. I'll just copy it. And we can go ahead and say, okay, API.collections probably. Yep. And in here, we want to pass the site ID. It's asking me for it. And we have it there. That's it. Cool. So we will just change this promise and we'll say that the result here, we want to console log this result like that. And I'll just comment out this for the site. And let's say, let's call it. Let's just say this. And now we're getting this data here. Now let me zoom in a little bit. We just got this array of data that contains just one object with a collection list that it's called Showcase Demos. This is good. We're on the right track. And that contains all the information from this collection that we just created. This collection with these fields, not the items, just the collection information. The slug, the fields that it contains, when it was created, when it was last updated, etc. We have all this data. I don't know if it contains the schema for the fields, but probably not. Give me a second. Items, collections. Get a collection. Right. Okay. So this has listed all the collections on our site, and you will probably see now that what we're doing is just digging in from the top. We're getting the site information. We have now got all the collections of the site, and now we want to get specific information from one collection, which is the one that I'll ask for, the only one that we have actually. And after that, we can get the information about the items, and we can just start digging in and getting more information. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to get the data from that specific collection. And there's an endpoint for that. There's an endpoint for getting a collection by collection ID. And we will do the same exact process. From this response that we got, we received an ID. And this ID belongs to this collection. And if you're curious, you can always check this ID also here. In the UI, you have this ID. So everything that I just did was for fun, but you could just have retrieve the ID from here. It would be faster. So we'll pick this ID again, and we will request a little bit more information about this. So we'll say API.collection, and in here this will ask me for a collection ID. We'll pass this, and we'll do the same. I'll just copy this then like that. Cool, and we'll do it again. Let's just call this script. And now we're getting a little bit more info. Let's inspect this info. What we're getting is, again, the ID, last updated, created on, name, slug, singular name. We're getting all of that. But also, we're getting the fields. We're getting the information about the fields that we just created. The author, the name. This is internal, if it's archived or not. This is also internal, if it's a draft or not. When was it created? When was it updated? When was it published? Who created it? Who updated it last? Who published it last? And that's it, actually. So you can see that we have a lot of extensive information, and people, if you try to think what you can do with it, perhaps you already have some ideas. But let's keep with our goal, which is populating this collection, right? We want to get some data, and when we want to populate this collection with that data, right? We have 3 different fields, and for now, let's just create a single item. Let's create a single item with a name and with an author, and that's it. Let's try it. Okay, so let's just go ahead and say, if we check let's go here to the reference. If we check the documentation, we have a bunch of things that you can do with the items. You can list collection items, you can remove collection items, you can create collection items. And that's what I want to do right now. So I'll just come here, and my goal is to send the correct data so Webflow can generate a new collection item. And we know that this is a post request with this slug, and it's requesting the collection ID. So cool thing, we already have the collection ID, so we're good. And this is going to accept the version, the collection ID, the live, and the fields. These fields, it's basically just the name, the slug, and the author. But that's what we want to send to that. So that's it. Let's come here again. Let's comment out this, and let's say API dot. This is probably create item and collection ID, right? Whoops. We're on the right track. So let me pick the ID, which I think it's this one, the 63. Yes, correct. And this will also require collection ID and the fields. That's probably data collection ID query. Let's try this. I honestly haven't tried it before. So let's do it now. This is asking for the fields. So we need to pass the author and the name. And I believe that the slug it's auto generated by Webflow. Let's try it. Let's do a live try and let's just give it a woo if it goes if we succeed on the first try. And what we will need is to pass the slugs of all the fields. So I'll just take this as author. Have music. Yeah. It was for encouraging me. Let's say that the author is Alex and the name, which is this slug name, the name is Joe. Like that. Let's try it. And I don't want to pass it as an object. I just want to pass it like that. Like that. Cool. So we have collection ID, we have the author, the name, and perhaps I'm wrong. Body fields. I have the feeling that we will have to pass it like this. We'll see in a second. Let's try it. Let's come to the terminal. Let's run this. And if something went wrong, fields is required. Fields is required. Oh, fields. It would be great if I wrote it correctly. Let's try it again. We have now another error. This will be validation field is required, archived and draft. Well, the first thing, okay, let's just inspect what's happening here. I'm trying to call the API, but obviously you're seeing that I'm not doing it correctly, right? But one very helpful thing to do is to read the response that I'm getting from the server. This is telling me something went wrong. You're not calling the API correctly. And this is telling me what are the problems. So this is very helpful already. Webflow has thought of it. And it's telling me the issues that I'm having. And the issues is that I need to pass if the item is archived, and I need to pass if the item is a draft. Okay, so let's do it. I will say that it's not archived. It's not archived and it's not a draft either, like that. So we're passing these fields. We're passing if it's archived, if it's draft, we're passing the author, and we're passing the name. Let's try it again. If we get more errors, we will just inspect the response. That's it. And I did not console log this, but probably this worked. So let's check it out. Let's just try to see if I succeeded, and then we can just talk about what happened here. Collections. We have an item. Yeah, let's go. We have Joe. Yeah, you had that prepared. Yeah, we have
That's
this
great.
Joe with the Alex here. So what we just did now was to programmatically create this new item using the Webflow API. Let's inspect it again, because I know I've gone a little bit fast. Let's do it again. What we've done is we've retrieved the collection ID that we are interacting with. We wanted to create this collection item from this collection ID, from this collection specifically. We also needed to authenticate the API calls. So we passed also the token. And then we call the method that you could either do it directly by fetching using a curl or a postman, or the regular fetch API, or in our case what we're doing is just use the Webflow SDK. That's it. And we're creating the item, we're passing the collection ID because that's requested, and we're passing the fields that we wanted to put in that item, and that's it. We succeeded with that. This is one of the things that we wanted to do. So that's a check. And probably that's most of the goal was actually that, because the next step would be to not only create one item, but to create, hundreds of it. Imagine that we wanted to do the same exact thing that we did here for the Showcase 2K project, which contains 2K results. So it contains 2,000 items. So the only thing that we would have to do is to, expand this code a little bit more to get the data from all the items that we want to create, and then loop through all the items and create a new item from each one of the records that we were dealing with. But it's the same approach. We're just getting some data and we're creating a new item with that data. That's it. And go ahead, ask me
Can
anything.
can I ask a very beginner question?
Yes, please.
When yes, when you're typing, I notice that I see a lot of hints and guides and what you can type
Hmm.
next. So you start typing API dot, and then it says you can create item, you can get item, you can do a whole bunch of different things. So
Hmm.
this is a benefit of using the Webflow SDK. Is that correct?
Correct.
This is from
Yes.
installing on that first line when you did npm or install Webflow API. This is installing the
Hmm.
SDK. Can I call it a library?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it is. It
Okay.
is a library. Yes.
Okay, so it's taking in this library so that when you're writing the code underneath it, it's going to give you hints. It's going to tell you what's available, all the methods that
Hmm.
you can go and pull from. So, so is this something that you get as a benefit using the
Yes.
SDK instead of something like a Postman?
Correct. Not only for hands, but also the SDK. It's doing all the job for you in terms of calling the API. So, for example, here when we were creating a new item, this is constructing an entire request that contains the correct endpoint with the correct collection ID in the endpoint. It's also including the authentication headers with the token inside the request. It's including the version of the API. It's also handling errors because as you saw here that we got a bunch of errors when trying to create the item. This hints were coming from the SDK. So the SDK has this error boundary uh, that's wrapping the methods, and when something goes wrong, the SDK is telling you, right?
Nice.
So it's just something that helps you working with it. It's not necessary. It's just an extra tool for dealing with the API. That's it. So yeah,
Nice.
this was a nice
Okay.
question.
We have
And I'll
yes, please
no,
continue.
I was just about to say that the main reason why I wanted to use StackBlitz for this demo was because I wanted to use here live the Webflow API SDK. That's it.
Of
But
course.
the Postman approach, for example, would have been also valid. And yeah, go ahead. Ask any questions.
So we have 12 minutes left. I'm wondering if it makes sense to show importing multiple items. Doesn't have to be thousands,
Yeah.
but it could be 10. And as we're doing this, let's see if we can also publish them. So Pierre asks about, hey, like let's make these live right away.
Hmm.
So we can add maybe 10 items at once. We can set them all to live published. And maybe while you're explaining, we can answer this question from Penny. Would this be a good option for migrating a site from another system like WordPress rather than using the
Yep.
CSV import from the dashboard? So, what would
That's
be
a
why
perfect
would
use
I
case.
choose this CMS API method instead of just getting a CSV and importing it to the front end designer tool?
I mean, it's kind of the same approach. So when going the CSV approach, it's just you're taking some data and you're dumping it in the Webflow API. So in this case, it would be a perfect valid use case, both using the CSV but also using the API. That's perfectly valid. And WordPress also provides an API that you can access with data. It's kind of very similar to what we're doing here with the Webflow CMS API. So yeah, what we could just do is just call that Webflow WordPress CMS, retrieve the data, and then just dump it in the Webflow project. So it's a perfect valid use case, and you could automate that. And that's why, for example, there are services like Zapier that allow you to do it. Zapier, it's literally just doing what we just did here manually, but for you, and it's charging you $20 a month for 1,000 requests. Zapier, the only thing that it's doing is when you connect, for example, WordPress to Webflow, it's just you know retrieving the data from one place and then sending that data to another place, and it's always using some kind of API. you know WordPress has its own API, Webflow has its own API, Airtable has its own API, Notion has its own API. So it's always the same thing. You have that public facing API, it's protected, but you can access it with authentication, and you can do stuff with it. You can get data, you can send data, you can delete data, whatever. So yeah, you're probably, a lot of people think already of things that you could do, but it's mostly about automating things like dumping data on a project, for example. And I think that we lost Joe. Joe, are you here with us? Oh no, okay. Um, yeah, you left us for a second. So you said that we could try to dump 10 items, right? Okay. For the sake of simplicity, because we just have 9 minutes now, instead of fetching the data from whatever and then dumping it, I'm just going to simulate that we fetch that data. I'm just going to create a bunch of items here, and then we will loop through the items and send them to the Webflow CMS. And what I will do is, let's just create an array of items like that, and I will create a bunch of items with the fields. So I'll just pick this like that. We don't need this. Let's come up with a bunch of names. I'll just be copying names here from the chat. Let's say, for example, Demetrius. We have Demetrius here, and let me do a bunch of copies. Okay, and let's say Pierre. Come on, guys! If you comment, I'll just put your name here.
Penny?
Saya, Penny. Cool. What else? Joe, we already have
Chris?
Joe. Chris, thanks.
Spencer?
Chris. Spencer, and I think that we're good for this. Spencer. Okay. We're just simulating that we got the data from a bunch of items. This is not the usual approach, unless you want to type things out manually, but it doesn't make much sense. So we're just simulating that we somehow got this data. We imagine that we scraped, I don't know how to pronounce that, scraped the site, and we wanted to get all the blog posts from Medium, for example. I want to just be a copy of Medium, and I want to scrape all the blog posts, and I want to dump them in my site. I would just scrap the data, and I would collect the data. And once I got the data, this is representing the data that I have. Then I want to loop through this data and send it over to Webflow. So we'll just do that. We'll just say that for each item of all the items, what we want to do is, what we can do better. Let's just say results, because I think that we can do it top level away. Okay, so I'll just say promise.all, that, and we will map the items. Stay with me. You'll see now what I'm doing. And we want to call this like that, return this, and we want to do this. Okay, let me explain what I just did here. I just created a loop that goes through all the items, and it's performing a request with using the Webflow SDK, and then it's just waiting for all the results to finish. Because instead of going one by one, I'll just do them all in bulk. That's it. And then once we got the results, I'll just console log them. And after I show you this, I want to explain why it's not the best approach if you're planning to migrate thousands of items or hundreds of items. You will see that now in a second. But let's just run this. We have the items and this is supposed to have fields. So we are passing the item fields, and we will also set all the items to not be archived and to not be drafted. And we're also sending all these items to this collection, the same one that we used before. So let's just run this, and obviously we got an error. Let's inspect why. Whoops. With this level of zoom, I find it hard to work. Await it's only valid in async functions. Okay, let me just do a quick fix. We'll do an ify like that. Like that. And I couldn't do this worse. Now, I think we're good now. Function. Load items, for example. I think it should be fine if we just did this. Sorry, like that. Okay, so and never mind. The only thing that I'm doing is do the same thing, but I needed to wrap everything in an ify to be able to call async. And we get an error. Item it's not defined. It would be great if we created this item here. Let's do it again. Okay, now it should work. Okay, cool. This is the response. We took all the data from all the items. We sent it over to the Webflow CMS API, and we got the response from Webflow that it's saying, this is the data from the new items that you created. This is the data. This is the data, everything, right? So if we go to the Webflow CMS API and we inspect that, we will hopefully see, yay, everyone here, right? So we did, the goal was to bulk send the data. That was perfect. But please keep in mind that this is just a very, very basic example, but we could be updating items, we could be removing items, we could do a lot of things. This is just a very basic use case. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
And we can also do these things within some type of a process or use case for an application. For example,
Like Noble.
yeah, right, like Noble, exactly. So yes, when Penny asked earlier if it's the same thing as uploading CSV, yes, if you are sitting there doing that manually. But if you're building an application or you're trying to create some process where Webflow is synchronized with something else, this is a great way to do it. And also, a lot of people are saying, Make and Zapier and Postman and all this stuff. I think it's really important to understand how this is working at this level. Just like Webflow, we can understand Webflow from the designer level and never think past designer. But once we actually open up that code editor and see how the HTML and CSS works, we actually get a better idea of how the designer tool works. And I think it's very similar here, where if we understand how this stuff works, next time we go into Zapier, we have a little bit of a deeper understanding of how Zapier works, of how Make works. So this is really valuable. I learned a lot from this. I know the concepts of this, but I've never actually seen it done live like you've just done. So that's great. And we are 2 minutes out from this episode. So I want to thank everybody for coming here live, watching live. Anybody in the future, it's okay if you're not here live. This is still very valuable post live. Now, let's see, announcements. I'm going to share the Speed Build Challenge link again. So, Speed Build Challenge, you have just a few more days to get on this. If you're thinking about it, please go for it. Next Tuesday's stream, this is our normal time, 12 Eastern on Tuesday. I will be doing a live build, which is not something that I have really done before. And I haven't really built a full website in 2 years. So I'm kind of,
Didn't you create
I'm thinking this.
Didn't you create
Which
the
one?
filters example, the one with the cars?
Kind of.
with a CMS filter. I don't know if you did that from scratch, but you did it,
Yeah.
almost it from scratch.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, either way, I'm coming out of retirement, and I'm going to do a live build. A lot of people are asking for live builds, working with Client First V2, and that's what I'm going to do Tuesday. I'll just be live building our new Finsweet hacks page. We are releasing a TypeScript version of all Finsweet hacks. So if you go to finsweet.com/hacks, you'll see a whole bunch of really cool things you can do with custom code, and a lot of it is in jQuery, which is good, but it's not really up to Finsweet standards in today, 2020 or 2022, a few years forward now. So we've rebuilt the entire hack series in TypeScript. So I will be building the landing page that will house that TypeScript update, and we'll have two hacks versions, the jQuery version and the TypeScript version. So if you're interested in
Nice.
that, come Tuesday, see me mess up a little bit, but by the end of it, we'll have a complete web page. Okay, and now let's say goodbye to the audience. Jay, nice to see you here. Thanks, Jay. Alex, great job. Great to hear that.
Thank you, Jay.
Duncan, thank you. Thank you. Demetrius, love seeing you here every week. Thank you. Rhino Rain, these Friday builds are priceless. Thanks for taking the time to share your insight and knowledge. Thank you so much. Penny, thank you. Thank you. Javi, Fred, we have Sammy, we have John Matthias, we have Pierre. Awesome. Great, Pierre. And awesome. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend. And we will be back next Friday with Alex. I don't know what we're covering, but it's going to be good. So see you next
Let's go.
Tuesday, and see you Thursday and Friday and all other Finsweet live days. All right. Have a great weekend. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone. Bye.